So that's the theme with Taurus, because you're coming into creatorship, as with any earth sign. You do the same with Virgo and with Capricorn. And there's also other things that I've talked about in other videos that correspond to it. But the basic idea is you're going through this miniature dark night of the soul process, which is where you're sort of being forged or reforged. All the shit that was bothering you in winter that you had to sit with, that you were really, neck to neck with, all that shit comes back. And because of the empowerment of Aries and the nature of spring, which is rebirth, you're in a position of power to overcome these things by simply letting them go. And a good indicator of that would be, that Buddha is a representation of Taurus. And if you study his mythos and his principles, they fall in line with spring very much. Especially the nature of bearing things. And that's the nature of Taurus, because you're essentially allowed to see and grow and mature, but you're not allowed to speak. Because that fire connection gets cut off. Anyway, after that, you go into Gemini, and the changeover is pretty instantaneous. But you feel more commercial. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I'm biased because I have Gemini planets. But there's something about it that you just feel more commercial. Of course, this is Mercury, so this is a quickening energy. And it has the aspect of clarity. And anybody who studies tarot knows the association of clarity to swords and air element to swords. So this shouldn't surprise you, but you should be welcomed to know that I have a lot to say about that connection, unlike most articles or people that you'll find, or even books. Is that the sword element is really under-talked in astrology, but really super important to this sign. Because it's all about quickening. And what that means is that you're shaving off the fat and leaving all the meat. And the fat of life is the soul, like the pleasures, the desires, all the things that slow you down really, on an ego level. Because you don't want to kill your ego by like starving it of things that fulfill you, but you don't want it to slow you down either. You need it to function appropriately, which is that it mediates reality. So when you talk about soul fat, you're talking about unreality. You're talking about the diseases of mind, which are the opposite of clarity, obscurity. You'll notice that these are all Buddha's principles. As I said, the Buddha participates in two signs, Taurus and Gemini. So there's a lot to do about clarification. There's a lot to do about dissatisfaction. This is just the time of the month where your desires just there's nothing for you to kneel on, There's nothing for you to kind of rest. And you know how Muslims like to sit down on their knees when they pray? And that's because they found something that they believe in, That's kind of what I mean. Like during this time of the month, there's no reason for you to get on your knees and be thankful, because everything's kind of I don't know, sideswiping you, making you feel pathetic, and that's part of the dogging nature of Gemini. Excuse my language, but like, that's why people hate malefic Gemini, is that they're always dogging somebody. Like, you could think of the fucking Wolf of Wall Street guy, you could think of scammers, people that are always trying to put the carrot before you, you know. But the interesting thing that I've learned, and I've known this for a bit, that the green emerald in Vedic astrology corresponds to Gemini. Now, if I take that a step further and I go to Tibetan Buddhism, which I love, is Tibetans say that the color green corresponds to the water element, not the earth element or the air element, like you would think. It corresponds to water. Now, I've seen science articles that discovered recently, in the past 2 or 3 years, that the lungs have they've discovered a new function of the lungs, which is that the lungs produce blood. They don't only take in oxygen and revive blood cells. They take in blood. They create and produce their own blood cells. So there's a rebirth process going in, as well as a creative process going in. And I've talked about that in my other Gemini video, that the way I look at the lungs is as twin turbines, or processors of air into thought or thinking. And I think that any occultist would agree. They would call it the air of the wise. And, you know, your lungs act as processors, and they take that scroll of air element, which on the occult side of things is part ether, and it turns into thought process. Now the water part's interesting. The water element part, I can see it, because green energy, you never disassociate the earth element from the water element, so they're pretty tied together. It would be like when you think about Virgo rules the intestinal tract and how it sits close to the stomach, which is the moon in Cancer, and both of those sit with the kidneys, which is Venus. So there's this whole earth and water element organization here. You know, Virgo is the earth element, Cancer is water element, Libra is air element, but I would remind you that Saturn exalts Libra, so it's also part earth element, especially through Taurus. But so you have that whole group system there, and then if you connect that to the chakra system, you have the sacrum and the sacral chakra, which is a crescent, which is water element, which is orange, color coded. Interestingly enough, if you go back to Tibetan Buddhism, they give orange or yellow a different color code. They say that orange isn't the water element, it's the earth element. So that's another interesting connection of earth and water. So you'll see that stuff, and this is just a bit of an aside from the main topic here, but you see that stuff and you see how these things group, and despite appearing separate, they function compositely. You see that parallel in mythology as the incestuous relationships between the gods. It's a metaphor for this sort of economization of energies or channels of energies or whatever. So, in a sense, it's like if you look at a map of your country as a map of electrical grids, you'll find central power stations, large antennae, radars, and those are the central nodes. But between those is smaller towers, receiving stations and stuff. I don't remember what they call them, but they're just there to direct the bigger currents of electricity and frequency. So it's kind of like that, at one point Saturn, which rules the I don't remember what it rules. The spleen. Saturn, which rules the spleen, might be the central node on one particular day where Saturn is the dominant astrological force. And it might have a grouping of, maybe Mercury is in Libra, so the kidneys are acting as a transmission or a directive or something. Whereas on another day, it'll be the other way around. If Venus was dominant, then the spleen would be a minor node or whatever. Fucking tired of talking about this shit, but it's super interesting at the same time. But anyway, experientially, you could just think about being at the end of the reforging process with the sun in Gemini in transit, because you're supposed to be a sword, you're supposed to recognize the unreality, recognize the untruths, dukkha, anicca, and anatta, and forgo that shit, look your desires in the face and say, fuck it, I'm gonna just toss that to the side because it's dogging me and it's not gonna, it's gonna lead me on a treadmill and bad shit's gonna happen. And you're also supposed to just be clear cut, which means cutting down the bullshit, lawyer talk, being precise, logical, thinking about what you're saying what you're thinking, and no extra. That's part of the clarity, and Libra participates in that. That's why Hermaphrodite exists as part of mythology. Hermes and Aphrodite, Mercury, Venus. But it's super cool to see that all in my own life, going back to the original statement, which is Hernando Cortez and the expedition to Mexico, and the infighting, is that I've been dealing with that in my own life, kind of like evil twin shit, where somebody's just been bothering the shit out of me. And I've also just been seeing the more commercial self, which is like business time only. Like, I'm spending more time catching up on documentating, and doing a lot of shit, business-wise and government-wise. And, allowing my soul to teach me, I guess, because it keeps wanting to put people in my life to take me off that focus that I'm on. And I'll say fuck it and let them do that, and it'll just verify that I don't want to do that. I got people coming up to me and saying, let's hang out. And I'll say, I don't want to do this shit, but they're bothering me so much, so let me just fucking do it. And I'll just have a shit time, and it'll be like, yeah, alright. Don't know why I had to go through it, but At least now I know for sure. And that's just how I'm feeling now that I'm accepting it. You know, I look at it as two sides. I was on the other side for like most of my life until this year. You know, always on the chasing end. And, you know, of course, if you fight long enough, you get the shit you want. But the idea is that the shit you want is bad for you because it's born out of desire and impulse, like an animal. So you got to give up on that shit. And the more that I do that, the more freedom I have to kind of look at things without emotion and just do that thing that people hate, that Gemini love, which is just dropping you. Dropping anything. You know, like I was dogging myself for fucking like last year, like, oh my God, I need friends. I need friends. And this month I said, fuck no, I ain't going to these two parties. I want to be alone this month. I got invited to two parties. I said, fuck no, I don't want to do it. And if anybody looks back at my vlogs or whatever, they'll see that same shit that I've just been like dealing with more shit than it's warranted. You know, right now, my main problem is I got shit going on in my personal life. People are like fucking with me, but I've been keeping on my toes so long and walking straight that I have you know, enough proof and stuff that I'm with what I'm dealing with, and enough support from local officials and stuff to be going legal with this. I'm trying to be vague for reasons here. But yeah, so that's Gemini. You know, you're just supposed to come out like the reforged blade. Like if you want to go full fucking autist and think anime and, you know, think, you know, fucking katanas and shit, doesn't really matter. It just matters that you're clear cut, precise, non-emotional. And there's your free will, you know. It's not really pretty and it's not really beneficial, which I think that's why some astrology systems label Mercury as a malefic, but at least the more you work with it and accept it, the more it works for you to give you free will. And I really do think like the best example is like the Pavlov's dog experiment. Not the results, but the experiment itself. Just like the oddity of like seeing the dog and the bell and the salivating and the, you know, the control over the nervous system and stuff. It's kind of like that. Like Gemini's just like that. That's why people hate malefic Gemini, because they just do shit like that. You know, troll you for fun or whatever. But yeah, I guess that's about it. I mean, I hope this at least gives you an idea of like the image of spring and the importance of seeing the seasons as images, you know, for the spiritual development. Because, you know, if you go looking at life as a garden only, you're just going to see the things that media tells you to see. You know, the apple is an Apple logo on a computer. You know, shit like that. Virgin is an airplane. You know, they're just going to confuse you with words. And that's their own Gemini nature, you know. If you ever start to forget why snakes are connected to Mercury, just look at a caduceus. But yeah, I guess that's about it. It's a reforger. It's not really a socializer, despite all the socializing going on. And it makes me interested to look at autumn from this perspective, about 6 months from now. Because then I wonder, because like you see that exoterically, like Scorpio is not a sign of positive attachment, you know. But maybe on a deeper level, it's about attachment. Anyway.